CRN, Chuck Wilder here. Let me tell you about my guest, Kimberly Dvorak, D-V-O-R-A-K, streaming live at Periscope.com, Facebook. She'll be on her own website a little bit later on, so you don't want to miss that, but you have to know how to spell that last name, so you can find her, D-V-O-R-A-K. Kimberly Dvorak, award-winning National Security, Border Security Investigative Reporter for TV, radio, and print media, Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy, correspondent for CW6 News San Diego, One America News Network, and remember the website of thekdreport.com. Kimberly, not a thing going on, right?
Nothing. You know, it was a great, quiet weekend. Nothing happened. No presidential rallies. No nothing.
No bombings, you know, because you're a Trump supporter. Yeah, everything's wonderful. I don't know. Boy, I watched that film over and over and over, and the guy was lucky got back in his car, I guess. Anyway, so there's a man named Samuel, right?
Oh, yeah.
Has he made up his mind now, Supreme Court Justice Alito?
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing finally, obviously, Justice Alito is very passionate about this case, and for this to move to the full court, he's going to have to find 4 other justices that are willing to take up the cause. Because as we've seen over the past week, and this morning was no exception, we saw 2 of Sidney Powell's cases thrown out of court in Georgia and Michigan. Both had really substantial evidence and allegations and affidavits, and proof that everybody is, asking for with the mainstream media. But, there's not a judge out there that's going to want to take on this case and be the bearer of, making the decision for this election all said and done. This is on a course, which it will be with Sydney's cases, which are private, which the Trump administration are making now, this is all going to end up in the Supreme Court, and they're going to look at all of these allegations. They're going to look at the affidavits. They're going to look at the video. They're going to, talk with, presumably have all of these sworn affidavits from people who actually saw the tampering taking place. Over the weekend, we heard from one of the congressmen from Arizona stating that within a couple of the districts that Joe Biden collected 130% of the vote, and Donald Trump got negative 30. So you're seeing more and more and more people come forward and highlighting these numbers. And, the Supreme Court in the end, I know we've talked about this extensively last week, they're not going to come out and say Donald Trump wins or Joe Biden wins. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to take all the information and they're going to send it back to the court saying that, according to the U.S. Constitution, it requires state legislature to go through and make changes to any state and federal elections being held within their state. And in these cases, they clearly did not do that in most states, and they're trying to blame COVID on it. But as we know with COVID, that's been around since February, January, I guess December, we're learning now. So that's been around. So that's not a valid excuse for this to kind of, to move forward, at least in the court's eyes. They're not going to look at that and say, okay, yeah.
Let me ask you this, all right? Because I know this is going across the viewer and the listener's mind. What you just mentioned, all right, going back out of the Supreme Court, they're not going to say, yes, it's Biden, or yes, it's Trump. They're going to send it back out, and then these people have to go through all the stuff again. Yeah. Is that going to take a couple of months?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if they come back and say that, okay, well, here's what the Constitution has to say about the elections and when they begin and how they're concluded. And if they come back and say, okay, at whatever the date and time of the polling closing, so if it closes at 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock, anything received after that is null and void. So none of those are allowed to come in. They can't count those. They'll have to throw those ballots out. So when they do that final count, those ballots won't count, and whoever the presumed winner is of what's left over will be the winner. And in this case, we know that for the 5 states really in question, that President Trump will most likely be the winner of all of these states.
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, you're talking about the ones that came in late, and of course, if you're a Trump supporter, you're saying, yeah, that'll do it. But then we have these testimonies that were on, like I saw them on One American News, saying, well, look, the machines were jamming, and sometimes they jammed like 3 times in 1 hour. Each time they jammed, they ran the votes through again, that they had already counted, which was illegal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so,
again, that's something else the courts the Supreme Court, they will look at all of these. And really, there needs to be like a forensic audit of the disputed states. I mean, if people want to go in and say, okay, we're going to, we really don't think that that's what the results were in California, so we'd like to do a recount. I mean, I'm just using that as an example. Under a SCOTUS ruling, they could do that. Will they change the vote from Biden to Trump? Never. I mean, they're not going to do that. So, when you look at all of this, again, it gets, I would have to say I talked to a number of people this morning, and when they see these cases get thrown out by lower courts, they're very, like, oh my gosh, that's it, it's over, we're not going to win, that's not going to, come our way. And while time is, ticking away rapidly here, that's not where this is ever going to be decided, and you're not going to find a judge, in these local states or district level that are going to, jump up and say, yeah, this is fraud, and we're going to move on. It's just a matter of, they all know that this is going to go to the Supreme Court in the end. All cases do that never are unresolved. So I think that, while Sydney's cases may have been a little bit, harder to prove in such a short period of time, her moving up the chain is a good thing as well. Because again, you're seeing people across the country, showing and willing to even go in front of cameras and sign under the penalty of perjury what has been going on within these, separate and small precincts, really. I mean, it's a handful of precincts that this has taken place in, not even like the entire states. But, the conclusion that will mostly come back down, and you're not going to have these precincts willing to overturn their decision-making process before that December 14th and the certification of the votes. So it's most likely will have to come down to, they have it's called the Federal Contested Election Act, and this is the act that we talked about last week that will allow the states to come in and say, we are the ultimate, arbiter of this, and we are going to come back in, and from all the evidence we've seen and all the affidavits that have been collected and the video watched and all of that, we're going to, as a state, we're going to give this election to what we believe is the winner, the outright winner, and presumably in these 5 states, they will give that to Donald Trump. Now, riots will begin immediately. Let's just not, overshadow that. That will happen, but this is all where it's headed. This is exactly where it's headed.
And I've seen some new ones from a source that I've had before and a guest, DB Kidd. Let me just give you 2 of them here. Dominion IT technician said, I worked 27 hours and not 1 vote was for Trump. Here's another one. Let's see. Captured in real time the moment in Virginia, 5:12 a.m., where they took 373,000 plus votes off the state totals. Yeah. And I mean, I've just got pages and pages here that, stuff that I didn't even hear about in the testimony.
Well, absolutely.
And these people that swear under oath, I mean, it's not like a slap on the wrist. It's a serious thing if you're lying.
Yeah, they can go to jail for up to 10 years for lying for something like this. And not only that, but this is at a state level as well as a federal level. You can, get charged with this at a state level or the federal level. So, yeah, they're absolutely putting themselves out there, not to mention the death threats and everything else that follows once they come forward with this. The Heritage Foundation's been kind of squishy on a lot of issues the last couple of years, but they have put together, if the viewers want to go and look at their website, they've put together a lot of the different fraudulent cases and all the affidavits and things like you just were discussing all in one place for viewers to go and look. And you start reading through these lists, and it's just, you can't help but just be just completely flabbergasted that mainstream media can't even be bothered. I don't know how anybody, even if you're a Democrat and you want Biden to win, and you're looking at this going, we don't have a country if we're not able to trust our vote. And I've talked to people where they're, this over the weekend, they're like, why should I vote anymore? It means nothing. And now we know they can just change our votes. So why should I vote? I'm going to stop watching the news. I'm just going to live my life. And that's also something that the Supreme Court will take into consideration.
I think the latest I heard was even like 40% of the Democrats think there was corruption in the tallying.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, it's a high number. I mean, and anybody should be concerned about it. And it's, like I said, it's just people from both sides of the aisle are just so completely flabbergasted at this, and then to not be able to go and see this on TV because, the left does not want you to report on any of that. They don't want anybody reading it, and those of us like you and I who talk about it, we get slapped with social media warnings, and this isn't, this is all disputed what they're talking about, and throw people in social media jail, and and all of this stuff is just, you would think that the arbiters of truth, the so-called media, would want to get out there and want to at least, look into some of these stories, but there is absolutely zero interest on their behalf. And at the end of the day, if the Supreme Court comes back and they just see this rampant fraud just absolutely everywhere that's overwhelming, and this decision gets overturned, how are those people going to be able to continue to call themselves reporters? They will have completely lost whatever credibility they have, and they're losing it fast.
Well, now that could be a problem. How do they dare call themselves reporters? If you're talking about the mainstream media, Kimberly, they've already lost that definition a long time ago, and I think they don't care. It's just, I'll do whatever you say, boss. I mean, it sounds like a bunch of people that, they call up and say, here's the words you're going to use,
Oh, yeah. It's the morning call. I've been on a lot of those morning calls.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said it's called the morning call, and we've all been, we get those morning calls where it's, the TV stations, general manager of newsroom, and here's what the big news looks like it's going to be. This is what we need to follow. This is we actually used to discuss what the angles were going to be. From what I understand now, over at some of the CNNs and ABC, CBS, and ABC, they've come out and they're told what the angle will be, and that's really I think shocking, because that's not journalism anymore. That's not journalism. That becomes propaganda at that point.
I saw, in the Veritas, is that what it's called?
Veritas.
The guy that goes in, O'Keefe. Yeah, talking to the head man at CNN, and I've been listening to your Monday morning reports and taping them, and yes, and it was sort of like, you're going to interview me now, right? No, I just want to let you know that we're going to be posting all of these things you're saying. And boy, you talk about getting caught with your hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Well, and also just, I will say this as well, because this, like in California, the rules are very, very strict about this. When you're recording and you're using a recording device in most states, you have to let the person know that you're recording, because that's also a state and federal crime if you do not. It's entrapment and things of that nature. So without a court order, most journalists, when we usually start off, are like, okay, do you mind if I record this just, for posterity? And the other person on tape says, yes, no problem, of course. So, we do that all the time, but California's pretty good about it. I think the Hollywood doesn't want that happening too much.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. And the reason is because Kimberly, is stationed in San Diego area and in Washington, D.C. She gets around. She follows golf courses, even if they move, but that's another story. But anyway, speaking of California and real strict about, you got to let them know you're taping them and you're going to try to catch them. because that's what happened to marriages whenever they expose the abortion people, Parenthood. And guess who went in and confiscated all the material?
Oh, yeah.
Broke the doors down and took all his tapes?
Yeah.
It was a lady named Kamalia Harris. Yeah.
I'm not even going to correct your butchering enunciation of that because I'm okay with that.
Well, see, I get away with it because I butcher it all the time, And then they say, well, that's just normal for him, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. But this is what some investigative reporting, and it's a fine line because how are you going to be able to get this hard-hitting investigative story out there if you are telling the person you're trying to get the information from that I'm going to record you, and then they're not going to be as forthcoming with the information that that actually Americans have a right to know. I mean, with Project Veritas in that particular case, it was Planned Parenthood and the harvesting of embryos and ripping their body parts. I mean, just some horrific things that were,
Well, they got away with it,
And they did, and using taxpayer dollars.
Take a quick break.
So yeah.
Hold that thought. We're on a roll, Kimberly, and I have to pause for that little short break there.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
Thank you to the sponsors for that. No, I'll just I think we should probably just finish up with the Pennsylvania case because that obviously Justice Alito is actually getting that and all of that information into his hands a lot quicker, and that will be the first case that hopefully will come back down with a decision for some guidance for these other states. Now, justices, the Supreme Court is no different on this. They are applying the law on this, but they're also sensitive to the political opinion. They understand that there are politics involved in this, but their job here is going to look strictly at the Constitution on this and the constitutionality. And what they are looking at in this Pennsylvania case specifically is that the state decided that they could use the no excuse absentee voting system. So you used to have to be able to say that you couldn't go in and vote in person because you were elderly, you were in a nursing home, you were deployed overseas, you were, any number of, health issues, disabled, things of that nature, and they would usually grant you it's okay to do your absentee voter, and you do that and send it in, and everything was good. And what Alito took note on this case was he looked at that no excuse thing, but he also is looking at the time sensitivity here, that safe harbor that a lot of people are talking about. And what he's looking at is that if the state of Pennsylvania, and he's looking just the Pennsylvania now, and I'm assuming that this would fall true on the other states as well, but don't quote me on that. But by certifying these votes, now the party who was injured, so to speak, the voters of the Republicans in Pennsylvania, they would have a substantial injury in this case, and that maybe it's irreparable. They aren't going to be able to get those votes back, and then we're going to have a corrupt result come January 20th. So he's looking at those issues, and that's what he's trying to weigh. He's trying to see here if the parties involved received substantial enough injury. And I don't mean getting in a car accident injury or falling down, but we're talking about injury to the party, about voting, and was this fair and applied correctly across the state of Pennsylvania. And what it's looking more and more like is that no, this was not the case, and that in Pennsylvania we know that you have to have the state legislatures go in and make these rules. And again, I think that what they're trying to fall on is that, it's COVID, but we had COVID dating back to December, January, February.
I think it's Dominion.
Yeah, well, that's what they're arguing in the other cases, and I think that's a strong, again, you and I both said this, I think that's by far the strongest part of this case. That requires so much time that, maybe 6 months from now we'll get a ruling on that. But then, of course, all the damage will be done, and it will be virtually impossible to remove Joe Biden.
I wish they could lump them all together, especially, Nevada and Georgia. Boy, boy, I'm looking at Georgia.
Yeah.
2,056 felons.
Yeah.
66,000 plus under 18.
Yeah.
2,400 something weren't registered.
Yeah.
And it goes on and on.
Yeah.
You know what? We have run out of time, lady. So who knows? Boy, next
Woo.
report's going to be out
Next
of
week.
sight.
Oh,
good
boy.
golfing. Yeah, and I know you're a military lady, and today's Pearl Harbor Day.
And you know what? Today, I just want to wish my daughter happy birthday. She was blessed to be born on Pearl Harbor Day, and she knows her place in history on this.
All right. Happy birthday to Kimberly's daughter. Kimberly
Happy
Dvorak,
birthday.
thekdreport.com.